Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you. Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
Hello, everyone. Happy holidays. I hope everyone is having a great time. This is the L Sports Alpha, Leonardo Velasquez, and welcome to the second episode of this podcast. It has been a while since the last time I've been on here, but we are back. And our plan for 2026 is to go full throttle on this channel where we talk about all the sports, a lot of big news, new trades, whatever it may be, all these teams, a lot of big games, all sports, whatever it is you guys want to hear, I'm here to cover it. So, first off, just a quick introduction again. I'm Leonardo Velasquez, the L Sports Alpha. That is what this channel will be called. And literally, my plan for this channel is just to cover all the sports that I enjoy watching. I enjoy watching tennis, soccer, basketball, baseball, football, boxing, UFC, and starting to venture off into other sports as well. So once we start becoming more into those sports, we'll start covering them. But for now, I think those are the main sports that we'll cover. It feels good to be back. A lot has happened since, a lot of new things in the sports world. I think towards the end of the year, it's an exciting time because we have the college football playoffs that are really going in to the next round. And I think now it's a good time to talk about it. So, our plan today is just to reflect on all these games that have happened over the last few days, over the weekend. The most notable game for me, which we will review first, is Texas A&M and Miami. That game really caught me by surprise because, with the Texas A&M playing at home, you really thought that they had a huge edge. But at the same time, you saw that in their last few games of the season, especially ending with that Texas Longhorns game, they really struggled to establish their game plan offensively with their run game. I think that was what they built their identity on throughout the whole season. And I think they just struggled to get rhythm going in that game. Marcel Reed, he really just like couldn't get going either, and like they couldn't establish their good running backs. Overall, like they had, I'm pretty sure it was Le'Veon Moss who came back from injury after being out for about 2 months. I'm pretty sure he was out since October, and rushing yards like in during the game didn't really have anything to go for. He had 15 rushing yards on 7 attempts. The longest rush was 5 yards, so that was definitely something I know Texas A&M was looking at that they were hoping to establish for that game, but it didn't get going. And then you have the Miami Hurricanes that they were able to really get going, on their run game. I think that's what really pulled away in the end because you saw that like after that turnover, the fumble, I think that's what really they capitalized on. They had Fletcher who really made the difference, 172 rushing yards on 17 carries. That was really the reason why they pulled away in the end. And I think if I look back on that game, I think with the amount of time off that Texas A&M had, along with Miami really, you know, playing well in the last few weeks of the season, because if we look at the way they've been winning their games, I mean, I know sometimes when people look at the opponents, I mean, 38-7 on the 29th of November against Pittsburgh, Miami Hurricanes versus Virginia Tech 34-17, North Carolina State 41-7, and then Miami to beat Syracuse 38-10. So some pretty dominant wins. And before those four wins, they lost to SMU, but it seems like after that they kind of found a little bit of a rhythm. And Texas A&M, opposite, trajectory. Ever since that crazy comeback that they had against South Carolina, where they were down by a lot, and they were able to pull off that comeback to win 31-0. They had a 48-0 win against Samford, and of course that tough battle with Texas Longhorns, where they fell by 10, 27-17. So if we're looking at Miami now going into the next round against Ohio State, it's definitely something to look forward to. I mean, this is something that I think people will be paying attention to when it comes down to what is their game plan. So if we look at Miami, what they were able to capitalize on, like I've been saying, the run game was crucial, especially Fletcher. I think that's going to be a big key to beating Ohio State. I know Ohio State will definitely want to have a similar game plan. The thing about football, especially in college, is when you're able to out physical your opponent and you're able to really get your offense going, consume the clock, have the game going in your way. I think that is what's going to be a big key in that match against Ohio State. To be fair, I think Ohio State will win that game, if I'm being honest. I think that's my prediction for that game. I will go with Ohio State just because if I'm looking at the experience in coaching that they have, I do believe that Ohio State possesses that advantage because they won the national championship last season. They were able to bounce back in the playoffs after a tough loss to Michigan. I know they had a tough loss to Indiana, but one thing that I've seen is that Ohio State has proven that they can bounce back. And now with Patricia as the defensive coordinator, you got to expect that they will be coming in full throttle on the defensive end. And I know offensively, they can utilize whatever game plan they want. I know the run game worked well against Michigan. And I think playing in that environment in Michigan will help them have that experience going into the Cotton Bowl against Miami. So I think that's my main takeaway going from Miami now facing Ohio State. And it's something to look forward to. It's definitely one of those games in the next round that I'm excited for. I think it's going to be an exciting matchup. And overall, I think Ohio State will come out with the win. Sayan, I think, you know, he showed some promise, you know, some good ability in the season, but I think in the last, against Michigan and then against Indiana, some turnovers really cost Ohio State in the Indiana game. So I believe this game will come down to who can have more efficiency on offense, of course, because we know that both teams have a great defense. So it's just going to come down to who can establish the run game more. I think that's what a lot of teams have been relying on this season. The run game is crucial. You can possess the ball for a lot of time, and then really, if you out physical your opponent, especially if you out physical the defense, I think the defense will get exhausted. So overall, I think this is a game that Ohio State has had time to, prepare for. They've been keeping their eye on whoever their opponent will be. In this case, it was going to be Miami or Texas A&M. So I believe that Ohio State will come out with the win. And now moving on to our next game. This is the one that I'm personally excited for, and that is the game between Alabama, and Indiana. So I think one of the main headlines with this game is that, Indiana and Alabama, different trajectories, of course, this season. There's some debate on whether Alabama should make the college football playoffs after that loss that they had in the SEC championship to Georgia. And they were able to make it. And they had an impressive win against Oklahoma. A lot of people thought that maybe Oklahoma would have the edge after beating them in earlier in the season. But something that has never happened before, and this was a statistic that a lot of people were emphasizing before Alabama took on Oklahoma Friday night, was that Oklahoma, I believe, hadn't beaten Alabama multiple times in a season. That's never happened before. So Alabama, I think they were able to learn their lesson and capitalize on what they figured would get going. The defense started to really get going after the first quarter. Like reflecting on that game, I think Oklahoma got settled in faster, but they were not able to continue their offensive rhythm. They allowed Alabama to get in the game, and next thing you know, Alabama's just shutting them down offensively, and then they're just capitalizing you know, by scoring points. And I think that's what made a difference. So a key takeaway for that game is that Alabama showed that they could win on the road, especially in a crazy environment like Oklahoma. But now, we have this neutral venue game that I think if I'm looking at it right, I'm looking at the moments that Indiana has had compared to Alabama and Mendoza, he's just shown a lot of resilience this season. I think that win against Ohio State to really solidify himself as the leading contender for the Heisman Trophy. I think that they can build on that confidence that they know what they're capable of. Also, that win against Penn State, I think that really showed how resilient Indiana can be. And overall, I think if I'm going to make a prediction for this game, I think it's gonna be interesting because I think it'll be a closer game than most people expect. The spread is on DraftKings, they have the spread, 7-point favorites for Indiana. So I think this game will be I'm gonna have to go within a field goal. I just think Alabama they have shown that their defense can, you know, get resilient, but Indiana, they just have so much composure and a lot of patience on offense that they know how to utilize their tools when they need it. I mean, Indiana, they can utilize their pass game. Mendoza has a great arm. He's shown that he's got good scrambling ability that whenever they need to pick up those extra yards on offense. I think they're able to do that with Mendoza's movement, but also the run game has been crucial for them as well. So I think that all around versatility on offense will definitely be the difference in this game. I think Indiana will find a way to win, but I think it's gonna be closer. I think it's gonna be under 7 points. I think maybe a field goal, maybe 2 like 6 points, something like that, but I don't think it's gonna be a blowout. I think it's gonna be a very close contested game, we have it I'm pretty sure that game will be the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, so amazing venue. I think it's an exciting time for, a lot of people. I think and personally, I think the Rose Bowl is the most, elegant game for the playoffs and historic venue, a lot of big moments. Super Bowls have been played there, so a lot of history within that stadium. So this is going to be a good moment for Indiana. I think Mendoza, after winning that Heisman Trophy, he he's shown that, that Indiana now can live up to the expectation because throughout the season they were considered to be underdogs. Their first big win against Oregon, I think that was a good sign, going in the right direction. And now Alabama, they've shown some resilience, some good wins. They did beat Georgia in the regular season. I know they lost to them in the SSE championship, but I think we shouldn't ignore that win against Georgia because Georgia had one of the most efficient offenses out of any team in the country, and I think showing that they can beat a high efficient offense shows that they can go toe to toe with them. And I think a reason why they won that game was because of their defense. Like their defense has shown that they can be resilient and then they can hold their opponents to a certain number of points and give themselves a chance to stay in the game. But I still think Indiana's experience in tough moments, in close battle games, I think Indiana will find a way to win this game. So I think reflecting on Alabama's performance against Oklahoma and now moving on to Indiana at the Rose Bowl. I think that will be a fun game. I'm most excited for that game, obviously because of the Rose Bowl, but obviously, two good teams. You know what I mean? So my prediction, I think Indiana will come away with the win, but we'll see what happens. These games taking place next week. The first game, Ohio State, will be on December 31st on New Year's Eve, and then the next three playoff games will be on New Year's Day, January 1st. And now we move on to our next game where we have Oregon against, I believe, they will be facing Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. Now, I'm pretty sure that will be the first game on New Year's Day, which will be at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So, looking at this game, I think this will be a fun game. I think we can expect a an offensive shootout. I think that's how this game will play out. I think Texas Tech, that offense, very resilient, very efficient. I think they've shown that. And if we look at who's considered to be the favorite, we have Oregon as a minus 1.5 favorite. So the sports books are expecting this game to be a close one. And I'm pretty sure it will be because I'm expecting an offensive shootout. Obviously, there's not too much to reflect on Oregon's performance against James Madison. I think if we can they were expected to win. I think those games, you had Ole Miss who also faced Tulane. I think those were not the games that people were looking forward to. All eyes were on Alabama, Oklahoma, and then Texas Tech and Miami. So now that we move past those two games, I think we can just get straight to the point. Like we expected Oregon to make it here against Texas Tech. So if I'm going to analyze and really make a prediction in this game, I think it's going to come down to who can outperform their opponent on offense. So if we're going to look at some of the competitive wins that Texas Tech has had, I do believe that Texas Tech has shown a lot of resilience on offense. Let's take a look at some notable wins that they've had this season. I know one of them was obviously BYU. They beat BYU twice. They beat BYU in the Big 12 Conference Championship 34-7. Another notable win that I would say was, I mean, a decent win for them was Utah. Utah was one of those like top 25 teams in the country towards the end of the season. They Utah, I know they have a bowl game. They did perform well, I believe, with 2 losses on the season. Yep, 2 losses on the season. So I think when we look at, comparison of wins, so Oregon themselves, we know that they lost to Indiana, of course. They beat Penn State, but we already know the story with Penn State, issues with like a lot of issues with Penn State this season. Obviously, we know what happened with their head coach, injury at quarterback, and I think that was just a game that at that point in the season that they were expected to win. I think besides Penn State, Indiana, their next competitive game. I mean, Iowa was a very competitive game. Iowa is known this season to have some good defense, and I think if it wasn't for, you know, the resilience of Oregon's offense to really pull through in the end, I think that was one of the crucial moments because I think Iowa just was well known for their defense, not their offense. So I think that's a good sign for a good win for Oregon this season. I think an 18-16 game, so they can use that experience in a tough game like that to really use it to their own benefit and trying to, come clutch in the end. And then another notable game was against Washington, rivalry game, rivalry weekend. I think that's another good game to like to look on and say that, they can win a game where they know that it's, rivalry game. So I think if I had to look at it from a certain standpoint about who's had more competition, I would say, but also just a competitive game, I think Oregon has had that a little bit more this season. And I think with Texas Tech, they've shown that they can be a high scoring team, but that lack of, you know, of a competitive resume, it makes me wonder if they can. I do believe that they can go toe to toe with Oregon. I think we'll see what happens. I mean, Oregon, I'm gonna go with Oregon a win, but with a high scoring game, you never know what can happen. You know what I mean? I do believe that this game will be high scoring and maybe like let's say like a 30-27 game, maybe more. So I'm really predicting a high scoring game between these two. And I do think Oregon will find a way to win. But since I think it will be close until the very end, you never know what can happen. So, but I'll go with my gut. I do think Oregon has had that resume of having competitive games to the point where they can use that to their advantage. But don't don't be surprised if you see Texas Tech put up a fight. So, and then I think that's what we will see within that game. Orange Bowl, you have 12 p.m. That will be a great game, I think. Very entertaining. I'm excited for all these games. And now we're moving on to the next game, the fourth game that we will be talking about, and that is Ole Miss versus Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and that will be the last game of the day. So, just to reiterate the schedule for these next round games. So, the Cotton Bowl will be on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 7:30 p.m. Very exciting game. And then we will have the Orange Bowl with Oregon and Texas Tech at 12 p.m. Rose Bowl between Indiana and Alabama, I'm pretty sure will be at 3:30. And then you have the Sugar Bowl, last game of the day on January 1st, after the Rose Bowl between Ole Miss and Georgia at 8 p.m. So a lot of good games, a lot of good exciting games to look forward to. And I believe that this will be a great game between two teams that have already met each other, and that was a high scoring game. So, similar to the Texas Tech and Oregon game, I do believe that this will be a high scoring game. I mean, Ole Miss, I know there was a lot of controversy, a lot of headlines regarding, Lane Kiffin and his departure to LSU, but I think Ole Miss has shown that they can ignore the noise and just focus on their games, and I think they will be able to capitalize and go toe to toe with Georgia. I know Georgia; they've shown that they can have that high volume offense, and we're expecting a shootout. I'm expecting a shootout. Let's take a look at who is considered the favorite in this game. Very exciting game. So apparently, Georgia is considered to be the favorite by 6.5 points. So that's something interesting because if we look at the previous time they met this season, uh, I do believe the odds were closer. I do believe that, let's see, I believe that Georgia was favored by around 3 points, so by a field goal, and that game was extremely close. And that game occurred in late October. So let's just double check this. So yeah, we have them versus Ole Miss. So actually, the odds were pretty similar on that game, but it was an 8 point game. Saw Georgia win 43 to 35. Very, very entertaining game. I remember watching that game, and it revealed a lot. I think, you know, if I look at Georgia, they've had a lot of competitive games, great opponents. As the SEC is known to have those tough, tough opponents. I believe that with Georgia having a mix of high volume, high offensive games, and then they had that very interesting, very low scoring rivalry game between, with them and Georgia Tech. I think they've shown that their defense can really get into a groove, but we can expect that with how efficient this Ole Miss team is, I expect a shootout, another close game. I know Georgia, they shut down Alabama 28-7 in the SEC championship, but I do believe that this game will really come down to who's more efficient on offense, like I've been saying. We have some notable wins for Georgia. They beat Alabama 28-7, which is an impressive win because George Kirby, no, not George Kirby. Kirby Smart, my mistake. Kirby Smart has struggled in recent years against Alabama, and to be able to pick up that win, they lost to Alabama on September 27th, 24-21. Very close game. They had another competitive, high-scoring game with Tennessee, 44-41. Some people thought that Tennessee was going to win that game, but I still stuck with Georgia. I predicted Georgia to win that game. Uh, they had a good game with Auburn. Auburn, I know they weren't one of those top teams, but they still showed with like how close they can keep games. 20-10 win for Georgia. Then that high scoring game with Ole Miss, 43-35. Very close game with Florida Gators. They did have a good defense, had a lot of close games, but unfortunately, they just weren't able to have those clutch moments where they were able to win a game. They won 24-20 against the Florida Gators, and then they beat the Texas Longhorns 35-10. That did not surprise me. I think the Texas Longhorns, like, they were waking up towards the end of the season, but I think there was just moments in the season where, they relied too much on their defense and their offense wasn't able to get going in important games. Like, I know they beat Vanderbilt, they did beat Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout, but I think, and also beating Texas Tech at the end of no, Texas A&M at the end of the season. I think those wins along with the Georgia Tech game, 16-9. So I think what we saw with Georgia was towards the end of the season, we saw their defensive ability increase. They shut out Alabama. They shut out, not shut out because obviously they were able to score points, but they just held Alabama to just 7 points. They held Georgia Tech to 9 points, and they held Texas Longhorns to just 10 points. So if we see that, you know, those last few games of the season, Georgia has shown their defensive ability along with what we know. them to be this year with their offensive efficiency. I do believe that Georgia will have an advantage here, but I'm not counting out Ole Miss. Ole Miss, we know that they have some great wins under their belt. They, if we look at their dominant win over Tulane as expected, 41-10 on November 28th, they beat Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, 38-19, Lane Kiffin's last game. But they beat the Florida Gators 34-24, and they had a great performance against South Carolina 30-14. They beat Oklahoma, which was an impressive win, 34-26. As we know, Oklahoma was known for how dominant they were defensively. They had another good win against the LSU Tigers, 24-19. And if we look at another notable win, I think that would be it for me from my perspective. So I'm expecting a shoot. I'm going to be honest. I think this will be a shootout because of Ole Miss's ability offensively. We know that they can run up the score, and I think Kirby Smart will realize that like after the first quarter, if this is like a 14-10, 14-7 game, we already have 21 points scored in total in the game. I do believe that this will just come down to who can outscore the other. I really do believe that, even though we see that Georgia has, put some dominant defensive performances on against their opponents. I think that Ole Miss, they know how to play Georgia. They played them earlier this season. It was a close game. Debatably, Ole Miss could have beaten them, but it just came down to that clutch moment with Georgia. I believe that, you know, I'm gonna have to just go with Georgia only because I've seen that defensive ability, but I'm expecting a shootout. I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna sit here and say that Georgia is gonna hold Ole Miss to just 7 to 10 points. No, I do believe that the score will be run up on both sides, and we will be seeing an entertaining game. I think we are in store for some entertaining games on this day of college football playoffs. What a good way to start off 2026. I mean, the last game of the day too. So, you know, those 24 hours will be exciting. And as a sports fan, I've realized how exciting college football can be, and a lot of good moments. Very good competitive teams. We're finally in that moment of the year of the season where we can just focus on those top teams that will be facing each other. And overall, I think we are in store for some entertaining games. So those are my predictions for those college football playoff games, and we'll see what happens. We are in store for some great games. And now moving on, we will transition to the NFL. So if we look at some notable moments this past weekend, obviously, I think from this week, we got to start off with the first game, Thursday Night Football, this past Thursday between the Seahawks and the Rams. So, if I'm going to give you my honest prediction, I did say going into that game that I believe that the Rams were going to win just because the Seahawks had a close game the week prior. I believe that was with the Colts. And Philip Rivers, he came back. I mean, that's another story that's been making headlines. And I mean, the man still got it, after a few years off, came back to the last team he played for just to give him a chance to possibly make the playoffs. But, the Seahawks were able to win that game. It was a very close game, 18-16, which is one of the main reasons why I thought that the Rams were going to win. But, the Rams, this is one thing I've noticed about them all season. I know Matthew Stafford, leading MVP candidate, but the Rams don't have a good defense. My honest truth. I've a lot of high scoring games. I mean, they don't hold their opponents, to low scoring games. So if I'm looking at the NFC and what we've seen so far, I mean, the Rams, they have a great offense, but they, week before the their game with the Seahawks. They beat the Lions 41-34. They did shut out practically. They shut down the Cardinals, but I mean it's the Cardinals. The Cardinals have been struggling all year. They lost to the Panthers 28-31, 31-28. Rams saw that win by 3 points. And I mean, the Buccaneers, they beat them 34-7, but the Buccaneers had some injuries on offense. I mean, they had Bucky Irving out. Mike Evans was still injured, and Chris Godwin, I'm pretty sure, was still injured too. And the Rams did beat the Seahawks, earlier in the season on November 16th, but that was a close game, 21-19. So I think in these last few weeks, we've seen that their defense has been vulnerable, and that was a crazy performance. A lot of crazy moments with that, backward pass that ended up becoming a live ball. The Seahawks recovered it and were able to tie the game. And I think this, like I said, I thought the Rams would win, but we saw how Sam Darnold was able to finally have a big win under his belt, because last year with the Vikings, like the Sam Darnold performed well with the Vikings. I know the Vikings were considered to be one of those leading contenders, but a reason why I still doubted them was just because Sam Darnold, even though he resurrected his career, he didn't have a big win under his belt. So if I'm looking at, now Sam Darnold, big win against divisional opponent to finally have a good lead in first place in the NFC. I do believe that, you know, this is a good mental boost for him. And if we're looking at the standings right now of the NFC, you know, I believe the Seahawks, they have them leading. So let's just pull it up right here real quick. So at the moment, I'm pretty sure for the NFC, give me one sec. So here we go. Yeah, Seahawks not first place in the NFC, which means that they would get the first round bye, home field advantage. And moving on, another notable game this past weekend on Saturday was the Bears. Bears, I mean, they had an incredible performance against the Packers. They've shown a lot of resilience. Johnson, as their head coach, is light a fire under this team. I mean, I really believe that the Bears can go toe to toe now with some big teams. I mean, beating the Packers. I mean, the Packers, they've shown a lot of vulnerability. So even though it's a good win for the Bears, the Packers, I mean, they've shown that they can struggle at times. I mean, I remember they had that tough performance against the Browns earlier in the season, low scoring loss against the Eagles, and now a disappointing loss, I believe, for them to the Bears. So I believe the Bears, maybe, I think their ceiling, I would say, is they'll make the playoffs, and I think they might get eliminated in the first round. That's just my opinion. I like what I see from them, but I feel like there's a lack of experience there still, and also a mixture of luck. So I believe when I'm looking at the NFC, I think the top two leading Super Bowl contenders from the NFC, I will put the Seahawks, but still, I think Sam Darnold needs another big win under his belt to prove, in my opinion, that he can lead the Seahawks to the promised land. Seahawks have a great defense, so they do buy the offensive time. And I think that that will be a big moment to look at as these last two games of the season progress. And when the playoffs come, that's going to be a big thing that the Seahawks are going to rely on their defense to buy their offense time. The Bears, lack of experience still. So I think first round elimination, that's how I see it. And then we have the Eagles, defending Super Bowl champions. I believe that the Eagles, still some question marks, if they're not in a good rhythm on offense. I mean, you've seen moments where they struggle to really get going on offense, and then the defense is not as good as last year. As we know, they lost a lot of good key pieces, and now we see them in a questionable spot. I mean, they've lost some games where it makes you go like, So I don't believe the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. I don't think so. If I'm going to be honest with myself, I believe that the 49ers have a better chance right now to make it farther than the Eagles. I believe the 49ers are a team that can definitely make the NFC Championship. At the moment, with my gut, I believe that the NFC Championship would be between the Seahawks and the 49ers. I just like what the 49ers have shown so far. I think they finally got Brock Purdy back, and Brock Purdy has experience in the playoffs, making the Super Bowl. The 49ers, they have a great defense, in my opinion. So if I'm looking at what defines a championship team right now, if we look at the last few years, I mean, the Eagles, they shut out the Chiefs. The Chiefs, in my opinion, they were able to make the Super Bowl last year just because of their defense. I mean, their offense, in my opinion, you know, it wasn't superior to a lot of other offenses like the Bills last season. So right now, as I currently see it, I think the Seahawks and the 49ers are the top two teams that can make the NFC Championship. But I still want to pay attention to these last two games. Obviously, teams that have already qualified and they know that they don't have that chance of getting that number one seed, home field advantage, they'll probably still play, some of their all-star players, but that's something we're going to look at as these last two games occur. And I just look at the Rams as well. I mean, that defense is just not there for me, in my opinion. I think for me, their ceiling, they'll make the first, like, they'll get to the playoffs, obviously, but I think they'll get eliminated. So that's just how I see it. And yeah, so I see 49ers and the Seahawks making the NFC Championship. And now we'll transition to the AFC. So things got a little bit interesting this past weekend. I mean, the Broncos, their streak is over. Their home field streak is over. They lost to the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars have shown some resilience, lately. I mean, I know that game against the Colts, they were able to capitalize on, Daniel Jones' unfortunate injury. The Colts were showing a lot of promise. They were very competitive. Indiana Jones, he arrived there. He lit a fire for the Colts, but gruesome injury that really puts the Colts in a tough spot now. I know they had a last resort with Philip Rivers, but the Jaguars, don't count them out. They'll definitely be one of those teams that can have competitive games. So with the way I see it, I think the Patriots finally got my attention because I mean, the Patriots, I've been saying all season, I want to see them win competitive games. I'm one of those people that believe that their schedule was easy, but don't get me wrong, this bounce back win against the Ravens was very impressive. Not only did you have that controversial moment towards the end of the game where the referees didn't make that pass interference call, and at that point watching that game, I'm like, oof, that this is that was obvious pass interference, but to be able to put that beside them and finally shut down the Ravens, because the Ravens, they were waking up these last few weeks. I mean, that defense was waking up. They shut down an efficient Bengals offense. I mean, the Bengals, they were, ever since Joe Burrow came back, they were always like efficient on offense, scoring more than 20 points most of the time. But then that game with, like, I believe, yeah, last week with the Ravens and the Bengals, that finally showed that the Ravens were kind of reasserting themselves into the playoff picture. But I think this loss really hurts their chances to make the playoffs. So now the Patriots, this is where I see them. I will say that game against Buffalo, they had the lead. They've shown that they can be dominant, but there's been moments in the season where in the second half they kind of take it easy a little bit. So I like what I saw against the Ravens. I think the Patriots show that they are a deserving a deserving playoff team that can go toe to toe with good teams. And I would really like to see them. I believe that if I'm looking at it right now, let's look at who are the top teams who have clinched a playoff spot. You have the Broncos, the Patriots, the Jaguars, Chargers, and Bills. So let's take a look at this. Patriots, I like their chances to make a good deep playoff run. I'm gonna be honest. I think the Patriots can make the AFC Championship. I really do. I was impressed with how they run up the score on the Bills. Unfortunately, if they can fix their second half problems, because I was going to say that there was that game against the Falcons where they almost let the Falcons beat them, almost came back against them. But I think they got to just work on their second half defense. If there's moments in a game where they run up the score, they have a lead, they got to hold that lead and just continue to apply pressure, no matter if it's scoring touchdowns or just getting field goals. You want to continue adding points on the board. And I think New England is working on that. I think these next two games for them are huge because now they're tied with the Broncos but the Broncos, I think they will win this Thursday. It's December 31st. They have a game in 2 days on Christmas against the Chiefs. Obviously, now the Chiefs are out of the playoffs. Mahomes is injured, so I think I'm expecting a win for the Broncos. I will be very surprised. Be very surprised if something goes the other way, because even though the Chiefs are out and Mahomes is injured, it's a divisional game. You never ever know what can happen, and I believe that we are in store for some some fun last minute moments in the season. I mean, the Patriots still have something to play for. They have two more games in the season, two divisional opponents. So if we look at that, they face the Jets and they face the Dolphins, both at home. So that helps them. They don't have to travel, stay at Gillette. I do believe that they will beat the Jets. I just, the Jets are now, it's the Jets, maybe I'd be surprised if something goes different there. And with the Dolphins, I mean, the Dolphins have played some decent football in the last few weeks. They've, tried to turn it around, but I think the Patriots are just a better team now. So I believe that the Patriots will find a way to win their next two games to finish off the season and to put themselves in a decent chance to compete for that number one spot in the AFC. Because, I mean, home field advantage in the first round bye is huge in the playoffs. It's huge. Jaguars, let's see their remaining schedule. The Jaguars, I mean, they have the Colts and the Titans. Jaguars themselves, I mean, they still have a good record. They're 11-4, so you never know what can happen. I mean, I believe they will win the remaining games. I mean, the Colts, with Philip Rivers there, I mean, he's trying to get the Colts to keep themselves within the playoff race, but I don't think it's going to be enough. And the Titans have had a struggling year, so I think I can expect the Colts to win their next two games. Chargers, my thing with the Chargers is this. I think the Chargers rely a lot on their defense, and there's been moments where they're not efficient on offense. So when I'm looking at the Chargers, I mean, they've had some impressive wins. I mean, they beat the Eagles. They didn't let the Eagles get a good rhythm into the game. They beat the Cowboys in Dallas. That was an impressive win, but we'll see. These next two games for them, and this ties with the Broncos because the last game for the season for the Broncos will be against the Chargers. As for the Chargers, last game will be against the Broncos, but they play the Texans next. The Texans have reasserted themselves. They got into a good rhythm. They've won their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games. Yep. 7 games, and we'll see what happens there. I mean, Texans, they have close games, but they find a way to get going. They're currently in the hunt, and I believe they will be qualified for a wild card spot. If the season ended today, then the Steelers and the Texans would be in the playoffs. So we'll see. That will be a very interesting game. And let me double check where that game will be. So that game will be in Los Angeles. So that does give a little bit of an edge. I think very close game. It'll be on Saturday the 27th, 2 days after Christmas. I do believe that the Chargers will win. I think so. I just think the sometimes the Texans can be a little slow, but the Chargers, I think they will find a way to win. But I think they will lose to the Broncos in the last game of the season. I do believe so because that game, let me double check where that game will be. It will be in Denver. So even though Denver lost to the Jaguars, I still think, you know, Denver will have that advantage. And moving on to the Bills. Now, my opinion on the Bills is this: rely too much on their offense, but no defense. I don't think their defense is strong enough to have them. I think they're. I. So this is the thing. The playoffs are different. I like if I'm looking at the teams in the AFC, I think I can expect. I feel like right now my gut is telling me that the Broncos and the Patriots will be in the AFC Championship, but if I had to swap one of them out, I would go with the Jaguars, honestly, because the Bills just don't have that defense. I just don't, I know Josh Allen has been performing well this year. He's a great quarterback, don't get me wrong, but I just think at the moment with the way I'm feeling, I think the three teams that I see that can be good heading into the playoffs, I believe that the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Jaguars are leading contenders in the AFC. So we'll see what happens. I mean, still big games to be played, you know, with a few weeks left in the season. So I'm expecting fireworks. I'm excited. And it's an exciting time because, as the season winds down, you want to see like really like teams leave their last good mark on the season as they're heading into the playoffs. So I'm impressed with the Patriots. Broncos, we're gonna see how they do to finish off the season. But at the moment, I would put Patriots number one, not just because I love the Patriots, but I just think they've been resilient, to bounce back after a tough loss. Mike Vrabel changing the culture, Drake May ascending to greatness, one of the leading MVP candidates, having now developed great chemistry with his team. Even though the Patriots have a little bit of injuries, Campbell, I know they can hopefully have him back for the playoffs, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, that's how I feel like this season will shape out to be. And overall, today's episode was mostly about football. And just to remind all of you, I mean, I love sports so much. I mean, I'm going to be covering a lot of different sports as the year goes by. And we have a lot of exciting moments coming up. We have the college football playoffs. Soon the NFL playoffs will begin. But with tennis coming back in a few days too, because the season will start on the 27th, you have some tournaments starting with Brisbane in the United Cup. And then in January, you have the Australian Open. And then shortly after that, you will have some good boxing matches. UFC will be coming back. UFC making its debut on Paramount Plus. Some big fights to start off the year. Very excited for that. So we will be diving into all of those. The Olympics, the Winter Olympics will be starting in early February. And then I'll make most excited for the hockey because especially with how the four nations really like took the world by storm, a lot of people were enjoying those games. Very, very exciting time for international landscape of hockey. And then, you know, in March, you have March Madness, big college football, big college basketball fan here, and some good tennis tournaments happening. So, like I said, there's a lot of good things to look forward to. And I'm looking forward to making more episodes. We usually will be going live, but if whenever I know that something is coming up, like if I know that I'm going to be busy, I'll just pre-record and upload them to my channel. But I'm motivated to just be efficient as possible on this channel, and you know we're just trying to grow a platform here. I mean, I'm excited. I mean, I've been wanting to really take YouTube seriously for the past few months, but just a few things happened and it kind of, I was distracted. But now that things have settled down, really, really looking forward to, you know, talking with you guys here on YouTube. And overall, I'm here. I love sports. I can't wait to connect with all of you. I mean, feel free to leave suggestions on what you guys want to see most and how do you think. Give your own predictions. I love to communicate with people. So, I mean, I think that's about it. And I hope you guys enjoyed the second episode on this channel. I will be back in a few days. I will post on my social media, All Sports Alpha, on Instagram and on Twitter. We will soon be uploading content on my social media pages, but for now, we will be just focusing a lot on the YouTube channel. And we will try to be focusing on a lot of the big moments. And obviously, with the NBA still going on, still a lot of things to talk about there as well. World Baseball Classic also will be in March, so I'm very excited for that. They just announced today that Bryce Harper will be on Team USA, so it feels like USA is going full throttle. They're assembling the Avengers team. They have Schoolboy, Paul Skeens, Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt, and they also have Kyle Raleigh and now Bryce Harper. So they're assembling a great team. We'll see if they can go toe to toe with Japan. And yeah, very exciting time in 2026 for sports. So that is it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, leave some suggestions in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Take it easy. Once again, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Stay safe, eat good, stay healthy. God bless all of you, and I will see you all in the next episode. Take care.